welcome back. Right, after wrestling with what felt like wrestling with a raptor, getting that out of the frame, the studs burying themselves into my arms, and a couple of slip discs, and needs to be in traction for a week I think after this. But anyway, it's out, and I managed to get it up on the bench. So yeah, there she is in all her glory, out the frame. And just give it a spin round, we can see it. So yeah, we've got each bank of 2 cylinders own separate water exit, which meet obviously into one, into the thermostat, and then out to the radiator. Oil pressure switch. The 2 headers are still on, and they're still on and go in and out. Bit of a shame about that cover. I don't know what to do with that actually, but anyway, so yeah, these 2 headers come out with the engine, because it's kind of, when that's in the frame, I mean there's the frame. So there we are with the frame. Bit of a tidy up now, jacks and stuff under the engine, taking it out. So yeah, there's a section of the frame, you'll know if you've got one of these, that section of frame that's removed from this side to aid. But I actually think, coming to put this engine back in here, we are gonna lift the frame over the engine, because I just think that's going to be the easiest way. It certainly was with that when I did that. I mean, there's a section of that frame that's removable as well, but that was an absolute monster of an engine. So yeah, stuff's in boxes, stuff that's, you know, all off this bike is kind of the way. Every nut and bolt that comes off a bike that you do goes in the same box, and then everything's in one place. So we are I think possibly one of the first things we're going to do, because I've ordered the gaskets, the first thing I'm going to do is actually pull the motor apart. So we'll do a video of this coming apart and what we find. So we'll have a look at it together. So yeah, just a note on this. I mean, it's the granddad of the V4s. The DNA is there all the way up through to your VFR 800s. The DNA is in here. This is Honda's first go at it, and there's a few the problems that this engine's got, if you kind of think about it now in this point of view, if you will. First and foremost, irrespective of oil supply now, what Honda did is, if you notice on, say, on this section motor here, we have, like that gasket, there's a half round. So when the aluminium head was there, what they did is they essentially machined that half round out, and what that is, that half round out, I'm just move that onto my compressor, is where they line board, they bolt these caps down, so the caps are unique to the head. This is a key point. This cap, as it says A, B, C and D on there, that I've done it but they are marked. So before, prior to machining, the Japanese little Yamaha man will have bolted the cap down, the head goes into the machining, and it gets line bored through, as that camshaft is, through, all the way through it, through the head, side of the head, all the way through, so it's in one plane. So there's absolutely no mismatch of anything. You try, and then they do the same here obviously, but what if you then took that cap off and put it on here and mix them up? What you can kind of get is, even though they're doweled up and they sit on the machine the same, there's just slight differences in the machining process. So that cap is unique to that position, and that cap unique to that position. That's when, if I can, I can't do it because I ain't got 3 hands, but if you imagine a half round like that and a half round like that, when they're together they must make the perfect circle. In essence, it can be slightly out if you put that cap on there. I'm talking just absolute minute amounts, but when you tighten the cap down, it nips the cam. Okay, this is why it's done in this process. So back to our Honda engine. What Honda thought they would do, notice now there is no half round scalloped out here, but there's a camshaft in there and a camshaft in there. So what did they do? I mean, how did, you know, the camshaft is still half in there and half out, which will become apparent when I take that off, but we'll just go through it. So what Honda did is they used a machine that basically machined out this half into the head, sort of like that, inside that gap. They scalloped it out, as the better, inside the head. So in fact, just hang on, can I get the head? Yeah, maybe, just 2 seconds, just wait there while you're not looking at much while I show you what I'm talking about. Here I have another head. Okay, it's actually a good head, it's just been kicking around, and so here we have another head. Okay, notice again the half round isn't there, but this machining has taken place inside here. So they had to go in from above and machine out with whatever tool it was that they went in, and just, it must have gone just down the side of there, and they went in there and in there. Do you like the sound effects? In there and in there. So machined it from above. Then they just used, is generic the right word? You just got lefts and rights of these. These are not, they are after it's been started, and obviously you put them back in the right place, but these caps, he can fit there, look. Okay, but he can also fit there. So what this has ended up with, Honda's cutting corners on the machining process. So these caps can be bought, they're not numbered, they're not handed, they're not, only after it's been run would you put them back where they came from, obviously. But at the initial first build, and what that meant was that that wasn't, to all intent and purposes, perfectly round and perfectly in line. It was a sloppy fit, shall we say. The machining tolerances were poor on this, so they got it nearly there, and it was a way of cutting the corners. And if you notice, every Honda head, 750, the VF750s, etc., they have all got the half moon in there, where they've all been line bored again because of this problem. So yeah, there you go, there's another one, and there's another one, and with the dowels on, and there's another one. So you get what I mean. I hope you get what I mean. It was Honda's attempt at cutting costs in the machining process. That's the first thing that bit them on the arse. The second bit that bit them on the arse was the fact that this banjo bolt that is teed into the gearbox oil feed. So if we look at this, that is the same cover from another engine. Okay, see the breather pipe and whatever, you can see just there where my finger is, where the banjo bolt fits on this engine. Now, first mod you can do to anybody is you can take that banjo bolt out, and the hole in the banjo, you can enlarge the hole, which, because it's only a tiny hole in there, go down this pipe, and but if you look at that, that feeds both heads as it tees there. Same size bore pipe, but it just now feeds that, and that is the single feed into the whole of that valve gear for them 2 cylinders, and past the T, and that's the oil feed there for the whole of that valve gear. All that in there is from that one point. That still works because it has distribution points in here with a little metal frame pipe work inside it. When we take the cover off, like I say, we'll see that when I get in there. But that's okay if you've got a good enough supply coming from here. Now, it wasn't. So if we turn this cover over and have a look in here. Now, it's teed into the gearbox part. There's another side to this that I'll explain as well. So obviously that's now inside the engine. Right, we've obviously got an oil feed coming in here, and you can see where, let's see what you're seeing, you can see where it's drilled in, and then there's a gallery going that way which feeds this bearing into this seal here and feeds that bearing. Okay, you can see that one going across there. Let me get a screwdriver into there, and then it feeds across there, but it also goes up there, up this gallery here, and into, there's a little reducing dowel with a tiny little hole in there, not quite sure 100% yet. That's up above, and that's obviously right at the side of here, so unless it feeds, I think that feeds selector drums behind there. Well, it'll become apparent when we get in. So yeah, and then coming up through that gallery, and that's our banjo. So there is a substantial feed there. There's a good oil feed there. There is, but with the hole in the banjo reduces the flow down this pipe. So that's a mod you can do, number one. There is other mods that are better, like the HRC bikes. When they were racing these, they did away with this completely. Well, as far as I'm aware, they just blanked that off, because they ran from the back of the oil filter, or around in this area here, they ran separate oil feeds you'll see coming up to here and up to here, and that's the reason why. And one of the biggest reasons why is when the oil pump draws, like from me again, and I'll show you. We've got an oil pump here. Right, when the oil pump that's the suction, okay, and then that's where the little strainer, that sucks up and into there from the sump. So as that's now turning, it then pressurizes that bit, and that's the water pump drive going through. It's actually in that way, driven from the back of the clutch there, and water pump drive on there. But anyway, it sucks up there and then pressurizes out there into the sump pan, and then the sump pan distributes it to the, basically essentially into the oil filter, out of the oil filter, then to the main bearings and big ends. Okay, but there's also this little side to it, here. So again, suction out the pump, pressurized out that way to the oil filter, but instead of all of it going through the oil filter, they bleed off a little bit here that's actually unfiltered from being picked up out of the sump, and that is that feeds ultimately that. So these whole of this valve gear has got a little starved oil supply to it that's also unfiltered prior to it reaching it. I get that it drops back down and at some point it's all recirculated and it will get filtered, but just prior to going to these cams it isn't filtered. That's the point I'm making. So then with this mismatch machining going on in the heads, that if the, I mean, Honda, as far as I'm aware and concerned, Honda pretty much got, they did various different mods to the and there's also different I think there's 3 different versions of the camshafts, because the first set were hollow, then they put like little core plugs in the end, and they used the camshaft as an oil gallery with a larger rail in here, an oil rail in here, so the cam was actually pressurized up with oil in it, and it had hole drills into the lobes, and feeds altered, etc. in the so anyway, they had a way of but that's fundamental. That's in a nutshell is what is wrong with it. But other than that, it's all right. But you have to address these issues. Having said that, you don't have to address these issues, but do you know what? A lot of people do. And if you've got a good engine and good cams and stuff in it, and this is a like I said, is a good engine, then we're going to try and keep it a good engine. So that's what I'm going to do with this motor. But yeah, when you see things like this, that's the doweling where it bolts up to the and there, but there's an oil feed there. Can you believe it? There's an oil feed there that's actually going to working parts, that's actually only just been brought up from the sump again after it's dropped down from bearings, etc., dropped back in, that really needs filtering. As I said, most of it does through the pump, and off out to the filter first before it comes back and feeds the crank, but then that little bit there isn't filtered before it's sent to do work here. So unfiltered oil supplying the cams at a low rate with a little bit of a Heath Robinson machining job going on. Anyway, I hope you get the gist of that. So it will all become apparent. We will explain the whole oil gallery and the whole side of it as we move through it. So I'll put the spare bits and pieces back, and so yeah, maybe you've never sort of seen that before, but no line boring through the heads, nothing there, like that. And that's the biggest fundamental flaw they did, was that there's a way of setting it up to check the valve clearances. You have to kind of push the camshaft up into the caps, I believe, to keep it sat up in the caps while you take a measurement, and there's all sorts of varying experts on it, but we'll see. We'll have a look. We'll get, as we get into it, we'll have a look, and we'll take it from there. I hope that's been a bit of a informative kind of step first before we go any further in, and we'll take it from there. Okay, pick it up on the next bit.